Hi folks, welcome to today's edition of our videocast, My Life with Robert Burns. We're pleased you could join us. Douglas Mackenzie and Jim Thompson here again to have a blether with another of our cronies. Hiya Jim.
Hi Douglas, hi everybody.
Today we're joined by a young lady from Alloa who's become really well known for her readings. Cronies everywhere, to tell us about her life with Robert Burns, please welcome Susan Chown.
Hello, good morning everybody. Morning Douglas, morning Jim.
Hi Susan, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. I've got sore legs because I was walking in the Ochil Hills with my friend yesterday, but I've had my porridge and I'm good to go.
I hope you use your spurtle for that porridge.
Oh aye. Widder shins.
Susan, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am from Alloa, as you said, and I live in the family home that I have always lived in, that my dad bought from the neighbour in 1958 for £700. And I had a good childhood here in Alloa. My parents were a bit older. My mum, at the age of 43, thought her varicose veins were looking a wee bit dodgy, so she went to the doctor, only to be told that she was 6 months pregnant. And so I was born, my dad was 54 when I was born. And then a week before my 6th birthday, my dad had a massive stroke, and that put him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and really upturned our lives, the lives of our family completely. But as a child, you don't know any different. So, you know, it was just my reality that my dad was now in a wheelchair and there were certain things that I could do, certain things that we couldn't do together. But my dad really loved going out in the car at the weekends, and my mum would drive us up through the Trossachs, and my dad knew all the lochs, all the mountains, and from an early age he would, you know, tell me what they were, what they were called. And you know, I really sort of sucked all that up, and listening to Scottish music on the radio on the way home, getting a bag of chips or whatever we did. I had a real sense of Scottishness from a young age, I think. Although at that point Burns did not feature in that kind of identity at all. I went to St John's Primary School in Alloa, which was the most gorgeous little primary school. I have such great memories of going there. And in those days, you know, the nursery provision wasn't quite the same as it is today. I didn't go to nursery. I spent those first 5 years of my life at home with my mum, and she taught me how to read. She played with me. We had a great time before I then skipped happily off to primary school. And I then went on to Alloa Academy. I did love school, I have to admit. I loved English, I loved history, and I had my first kind of taste of performing, I suppose, at primary school. I remember we did the poem Beowulf, and I was cast as the monster Grendel and did a big scary monster voice, and thought, oh, I really like this. This is good fun. This feels right. And again at Alloa Academy, we did a musical called The Dracula Spectacular, and I played Genghis, the hunchbacked retainer, with a green face and a silly wee squeaky voice. And again, I felt really comfortable doing that. And I kind of knew, I think at that point, that some kind of performance and was definitely something that I wanted to explore. I was also in the debating team at school. I always liked to talk, I suppose, and talk always with meaning, if you know what I mean. So communication, I think, was important early on, and I would say is my primary thing. You know, if somebody had to ask, you know, when I'm not here, what did Susan Chown do? What was she? I think over everything, I would hope they would say she was a good communicator. And that has really kind of been part of everything that I've done since then, really.
You said you enjoyed English and history. Is that what you majored in as you went through school?
Yeah, it was all kind of art subjects. You know, before he took his stroke, my dad was a maths lecturer at Falkirk College, but I still can't add up or subtract or have anything to do with numbers whatsoever. So words are good, numbers are not good. And it was all really kind of artistic things that I did at school. And I did know when I left school that I wanted to act. That was the thing that I wanted to do more than anything. But I had quite a few voices in my ear saying, oh, yeah, but, you know, what are you going to do if that doesn't work? You need to get a degree, you know. So I was kind of persuaded to go to university. But then I did a kind of silly thing because I went to Glasgow University and did theatre studies. So I was trying to reclaim what I wanted to do. But really at the university, it was more theoretical. It wasn't really acting, you know, as such. So I combined that with biblical studies. So there you have the most useless degree in the entire universe. An MA in biblical and theatre studies. Useless. Useless. It's good for a chat. So, you know, when you're sitting at a burn supper, you know, and you're having a blether to somebody, it's quite good for a wee bit of entertaining conversation. But it's never really been useful for anything else, I have to say. And in my 20s, I kind of flitted from different jobs. I did perform for a wee while, doing different things, stuff for children, schools tours, and I worked in Ballachulish for a while in a place called Highland Mystery World. So I did do things, and I kind of then ended up doing qualifications backwards. So I did my MA at Glasgow, and then I went to Fife College and did an HND in acting because I still felt I hadn't quite explored that properly. And then many years later, I did an HNC in early years childcare and education. So I've kind of done it back to front. But again, everything that I did, even when I was performing with a French company, I got a job doing a schools tour with this French theatre company. And we were really telling stories, kind of folk tales and myths from Normandy and Brittany. And I remember when the girl said to me, you know, that I had got the job, and I was just gobsmacked because I had my higher French, but there were people who were actually French who had auditioned for the part. And I was like, yeah, but they're French. And she said, yeah, but you're able to get it across better. So that was, you know, quite an important moment, I think, in terms of me understanding, conveying story and conveying meaning to story as well.
So has your work always been associated with the theatre or acting?
No, not really. I mean, I have also spent a good time. I was a supervisor in an underwear shop for many years.
Bet that was pants.
Well, it was just full of pants, and trying to tidy them up at the end of the night. What a nightmare. But again, the best thing about that was the people that you met. So I was a trained bra fitter, and you know, people would come in and you had to, in a very short space of time, deal with them and be sensitive towards them and work out what they wanted. And you know, you could end up building up quite nice relationships with regular customers. And I loved all of that. People.
And talk about people, what about family? Can you tell
Yes,
us anything
so
about them?
yes, I live here in Alloa with my partner Peter and my son Monty, and Peter's daughter Sarah comes every other weekend, and well, I was going to say we go out and do things, but we don't really at the minute. And Peter, also has an interest in kind of theatre and creative stuff as well.
Any particular parts that you've played in the past that have been better in terms of your memory than others?
Do you know, it actually seems quite a wee while ago since I did stuff like that. I was a member of a local drama group here in Alloa called the Almond Dramatic Club, which is an amazing little group because they have their own theatre, which was an old coach house for a big house in Alloa. So it's the Coach House Theatre. And I've had many happy memories of doing productions there, including actually a few years ago of helping direct a production of The Silver Darlings, and that was a great experience. And in 2009, I think it's 2009, that the homecoming year, was that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I was involved in a production in a local hall, and I played Jean Armour actually in that. When it was a kind of concert dedicated to Burns, and it had music, but there was a little section in it with a kind of little play, and I played Jean Armour in that.
Very good. The other thing you become known for is your job as a celebrant. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, so in 2013, my brother John passed away, and I spoke at his funeral. And then a few months later, my mum also died. And because I had spoken at my brother's funeral, I knew I had to speak at my mum's. And I think I sat on that experience for a wee while, but it was always in the back of my mind that probably I had the skills and the experience to do it for other people. And so I eventually kind of came round to the conclusion that that's what I should do. And I did some training. And then in 2018, I did my first funeral service for a family. And I have to say, it feels like the culmination of all the different things that I've ever done has landed in the right place for me now, definitely. To be able to tell people's stories, whether it's their love story or their life story, is such an amazing privilege. And, to be able to do that is just such an honor, really. I can't explain how it makes you feel.
And did you have to do a lot of training for that role?
There are different training courses that you can go on, but they're not hugely lengthy. But I think before I kind of came to the training, I understood that I already kind of had a good base with which to work with. And of course, like any job, you only really realize what it's like once you're doing it. So it's the consistency of doing that over and over again that can emotionally be quite difficult. And when a funeral director phones you, you have no idea what the circumstances are. You don't know the age of the person. You don't know anything about it. So you can end up, doing some very tricky services for people. And of course, in the last year, it has been especially difficult.
Yeah, it must have been very difficult indeed, especially with people having limited friends and family around them.
Yeah. I mean, at its height, there was only 5 people, at service. Now that's just not feasible for most people in terms of the number of people in their family, really. I feel very lucky that I've been able to keep working through lockdown, but it has been a hard year.
Yeah. You talked about the ability to tell stories, and one of the things you've been doing during lockdown is putting some wee stories up on social media. What got you started on that?
Again, maybe just a wee bit of lockdown boredom, perhaps, and a feeling that I just wanted to kind of do my own thing, try out, just talking about everyday stuff that kind of cropped up and was in my head, and see if I could do it in a way that might be even remotely interesting. So it was probably for my own entertainment more than anything else, really.
Yeah, the ones I particularly enjoyed was one about recommendations for what to read while sitting on the toilet, which I think was the Bruins and Oor Willie.
Yes, I mean, of course, what I should have said on that occasion as well was that you would have your works of Robert Burns on top of the Bruins and Oor Willie, but that was a given, obviously, that we'd all have our Burns book near to hand at the Cludgy.
and also how to make the shape of an elephant's head out of the peelings of a satsuma was another one I saw.
Do you know, I really do get a lot of enjoyment from ordinary things. And, I didn't even know until I did that video that when you peel a satsuma or something like that, it's always going to have an odd number of bits in it. I didn't know that. Every day is a learning day.
Very good. And you also did one that I can remember that you might have done more, featuring the Scots Lead. You took a Matthew Fitt book and read it out, and which I thought was tremendous.
Yes, I've been involved for a couple of years with a local community group, Sauchie Community Group, and have taken part in their annual Christmas concerts here in Alloa in the town hall. And I've done a couple of those at those concerts, and they always seem to go down really well. People enjoyed them. They're written so well that it's impossible not to, just make people enjoy the language when you tell them.
And are you planning to do any more? I think it was the Three Little Pigs was the one that I heard.
Yeah. I normally do Snow White's a good one as well. They're all really good in that little book, a wee book of fairy tales it's called, and Cinderella's good as well.
Have you got them on a YouTube channel somewhere, or are they all just through Facebook?
On Facebook, but that's you just mentioning that, Douglas, is probably the push that I need to make that YouTube channel happen. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I think perhaps we need to move on and talk a little bit about your interest in Robert Burns, and I'll ask Jim to start that conversation off. Over to you, Jim.
Susie, the first question is quite easy, to be honest with you. When and why did you start with Burns?
Well, I'm very much a latecomer to Burns. It wasn't part of my childhood at all. I do remember lying on my tummy reading or trying to read a very old little book that was my dad's Burns book, and trying many times to get my head round the Twa Dugs. But I must have been about 7 or 8, so it just wasn't happening. But I was intrigued, I kept going back to it and having a wee look. But Burns was never taught at school. There weren't any competitions in this area at that time. And I really didn't have any kind of knowledge of Burns at all as a child. I did, when I worked with a company in my 20s, I worked for a puppet company, and we did a shadow puppet show of Tam O'Shanter. But if I'm being honest, it was so frantic, and you were having to move the sticks so quickly. That's what I was thinking about. I wasn't worrying about what Burns was saying. I was just kind of concentrating on what I was doing. But I really genuinely don't know why, but in 2014, I took a notion to do Tam O'Shanter. And I thought, right, I think I could learn that and I would like to maybe do it. So I got in touch with a few local Burns clubs, and I was quite surprised by some of the responses, especially from the club that said to me, well, you know, it's an all male club and we're a wee bit uncomfortable at the idea of you sitting in the corridor while we eat our supper. So I said, well, that's okay. I feel a wee bit uncomfortable about the idea of sitting in the corridor while you eat your supper as well. So I just kept going, phoning around places until eventually Jim Hunter was the man that said, you come to our supper and do Tam O'Shanter. And I did. And it went really well. And the man sitting next to me said, did you know there was a competition? And I said, no, I didn't know anything about that. So I investigated it and decided, kind of still on a high from having done it at all, I would enter the competition. And I did that in 2015. And I drove on my own to Dumfries from Alloa. I changed myself in the toilet and I came running out, and Jane Brown said to me, you're second, you're on second, but unfortunately the man who's on first is stuck somewhere in a taxi. So actually you're going to have to go on first. And I can honestly say, of all the things I've ever done, I have never until that moment experienced the entire insides of my mouth drying up. But they did at that moment. Because when I looked down the Globe Tavern and saw all these expectant faces, some people had books, you know, and I thought, well, this is quite scary. But it was a wonderful experience, because once I realised that what everybody watching wanted was you to do it right, was you to do it well. And I soon felt that they were with me and we were kind of going through the story together. It was wonderful. And I won the competition and then drove home. So that was my first experience of a competition and my first real experience of Burns or of Tam O'Shanter.
I first met you at the Laprate competition. You're obviously starting with Tam O'Shanter. Jane Brown spoke to me actually about your performance, because I was at the judge the year before when I was president of the federation, and it's a great competition. But I genuinely feel, and I'm not being biased here because it's the Ayrshire, but I genuinely feel the Laprate competition where we met is, to me, is just best of breed in terms of quality.
Yeah, and I just kind of entered that the next year because I was kind of on a roll and I was kind of going, well, what is this poem? You know, I knew about Tam O'Shanter, but I had never heard Laprate. Didn't really mean anything to me. So I had to kind of really investigate it. And of course, it's not as easy to do as Tam O'Shanter, because you have to dig deeper to find the story in it and to get the best out of it. I think it's just not as easy as Tam O'Shanter is. But then that felt like a fresh challenge in itself. And yeah, it was scary again, because there was more people that I hadn't met before. And I think the thing that put me at ease during the Laprate competition was some of the lovely ladies from the Irvine Lassies who quickly kind of latched on to me because I was obviously a lady, a woman, and they were like, come, you're going to do this. And they were so lovely and supportive and it made it a nice experience.
You're talking very positively about it, but it's a competition. People are competing, and I don't know that people realise the depth of your learning in terms of presenting a poem at one of these competitions.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a long time, absolutely, to get right into the guts of it and to make sure that you're doing it, you know, exactly in terms of what's on the page. Every mark on the page is important, whether it's punctuation or, you know, it's not just the words. And it does take a while to kind of work on all of that. But to be honest, that's the bit I like. I like working on it. I like seeing how I can make it better, or whether it makes more sense if I emphasize one thing rather than another. The really scary thing was the next year, of course, was doing the Masters competition. I don't think I've ever felt as nervous as I did that day. And just before I kind of came in to kind of be part of all of that, I sat in the car, and one of my closest friends' sisters was very ill. She was dying. And I just kind of somehow turned that into a determination somehow, you know, to go ahead and just do the best that I could. And it's the same when you're speaking anywhere. When you start off, there's a residual noise, you know, that people take a wee while to settle down when you start doing something. But there was an amazing moment at the Laprake where I could see out the corner of my eye the person at the bar cleaning, you know, drying a glass. But when I saw them stop moving and realised that they were also listening to what I was doing, you know, everybody had settled and everyone was listening. And that's a very special moment, I think. But I felt very, very nervous that day, I have to say.
Given the competitions, that's not a surprise. But I'd like to get back to something you said earlier on about, you know, an all-meal bun supper. I take it from these competitions, you're now regular at bun suppers and doing readings or recitations, as they call them in other parts of the country.
Kind of, I would say it's kind of tailed off. You know, obviously this year it's been very different. I did the year after the Laprake, I did a couple of big kind of suppers. I did one for the Beatson, and that was really exciting because it was called The Bard and His Bells, and it was all female performers, and that was, or speakers, and that was really good. And then I did one at Stirling Castle as well, but I would say in the last couple of years it's kind of it's not been as much as it had been previously. But then again, I'm not a member of a club and I'm not a member of the federation, so maybe that's, you know, I don't know, stopping me maybe, or I don't know.
Certainly, if in terms of buns, if you're a member of a club, there are many more opportunities because there's a lot of inter-club reaction, you know, interaction. Most clubs have I mean, some kind of night where they're inviting people along, and everybody likes to do their party pieces that way. Have you thought about joining the club?
Well, do you know what's in my mind now? And I haven't got a clue how you do it, but is starting a club. Because I quite like the idea of a family club, a club that's for different generations all at the same time. And I know that that would probably be quite different from the way a traditional club looks, and it would also maybe, you know, have to take place in a different way. But just with an eye on the future and hoping that, you know, trying to take Burns forward. I like the idea that you could have a club where there was children, there was young adults, there was, you know, grands and grandpas, and everybody could be there at the same time. But that's just a wee daft off my head.
Yeah, it's not that daft. I mean, I'm a member of a club that is 3 and 4 generational. You know, with you know, sons, grandsons, great grandsons, and obviously the grandparents. I'm just wondering what your target audience would be with a family type club.
I'm not sure myself, Jim. I've not really kind of developed the idea much, but I think certainly in this area, you know, where you are, I think there is that heritage of it being passed down, whereas here maybe not so much. So it's kind of trying to build it from the outside in, which it might be tricky, but I think it's worth thinking about.
It certainly is, and starting one's no problem. All you need is somebody to start one. There's somebody to drive and the ability to just, you know, get it going and starting events. And it just needs to be one event a year to start with,
Okay.
which is some kind of celebration of the life of Burns.
Yeah. And it's interesting that at this time, when more and more people are using video technology, it's amazing how much easier it is to get people together. I mean, one of the things we found with our cyber version of the Bachelors Club is that we now have people attending that from far and wide, from long distances, that previously wouldn't have been able to attend. So it's amazing how what a difference that has made, the ability to use the technology.
Yeah, I think going forwards for everyone, you know, the possibilities are different than they were. Yeah. And I think, you know, like you're doing is sort of taking that and going with it. And I think that is definitely something that would benefit everyone and to get Burns to a wider audience.
Yeah, we've skirted round about Burns and your performances and such like, but we've not asked you to do any recitations or readings. Is there anything that any verses that you'd be interested in giving us?
I was kind of having a wee look, and you know, you're talking about technology there, and it's really tempting to think of what Burns would be like if he was dropped into now. And I can't help thinking that he would be a bit of a Twitter man. I think out of all the social media platforms, I can see him really kind of doing well on Twitter. And I like a lot of the little verses, you know, that whether they were scratched on window panes or whether they were epitaphs for people, you know, I like this one here that's on a dog of Lord Eglinton's. I never barked when out of season. I never bit without a reason. I ne'er insulted weaker brother, nor wronged by force or fraud another. We brutes are placed a rank below. Happy for man, could he say so. Just tiny little bits and pieces that I just think are great. And I love these Dumfries epigrams. I think one of the things that I definitely kind of picked up from, you know, acting is observation of people. And of course, that's something that, you know, Burns does so well, all the people round about him. And I like on James Swan, on his being elected councillor and Baillie. Baillie Swan, let you do what you can. God hae mercy on honest Dumfries. But ere the year's done, good Lord, Provost John will find that his swans are but geese. And I think this is my favourite. It just says, on a lady of Amazonian stature, should he escape the slaughter of thine eyes, within thy strong embrace he struggling dies.
Very good.
I think maybe that was just an antidote to doing something as long as Tam O'Shanter or Lecrae. Couple of lines.
How do you find the learning process? I think you said to me at one stage that with your background in acting, you found it quite easy to learn poems.
Yes, I certainly have done in the past, but I would say I'm finding it harder to retain them now. And the way that I've kind of learned them in the past is for that specific reason. So if I'm learning the poem for Lecrae, then that's why I'm learning it, and it could fall out my head the next day. I'm not one of these people that you see all the time, and I envy them, who can just appear and start, you know, spieling off every Burns poem known to man. I just don't quite work that way. I have to have a reason for kind of knowing it. It's almost as if I treat each performance as an individual thing, really, rather than just kind of knowing them. But I wish I was like that a bit more.
And we talked before we started recording about the experience of competitions and the fact that the judges are looking for accuracy, even in terms of the punctuation. Does that make it more difficult than performing something else?
No, I think it makes it easier, because the punctuation tells you how to say it very often. It gives you clues as to how it should be said, and so I love the punctuation and pay lots of attention to it, because I think it's telling you what to do.
And at the moment, you're the holder of the Lecrae Masters, and at the moment the competition, or the organisers of the competition, have put it on hold for a few years, until the local committee gets themselves organised to start that up again. So at some point in the future, would you be in a position to defend that trophy?
Well, the one thing I didn't do, because I can't really remember why, but I didn't have the experience of performing the poem at the graveside. And that is the one thing I would like to do. Because when I saw the previous person doing it, I just thought, wow, you know, it felt so amazing to be in that place and to deliver that poem. It just felt really special, and I would quite like to do that. But I wouldn't say I'm in a hurry to compete again, actually.
Well, I'll pass that message on to the guys that are organising the festival at the moment. They're still running the festival, but not the competition just now. Okay. Are there any other poems that you're attracted to that you fancy having a go at?
Well, despite the fact I'm saying to you that I think my memory's not as good as it was, I would quite like to try all the big ones. Yeah. I would. And I've got this fantasy in my head of having a day where I do them all, you know, one after another, perform them all in one day, and then collapse in a heap and wash my face in whiskey to revive myself, you know.
Does looking at the poems give you a chance to think about the characters involved in the poems? Are there characters that emerge that are of particular interest to you?
Yeah, what I do like about a lot of Burns stuff is that he doesn't just pick the same perspective. You know, there are many poems that are from a female point of view as well, and I would like to explore those more, definitely. You know, sometimes he's talking as a father, as a mother, as a, you know, a lover. There's lots of variety within that, so that's why it's never boring to read any of his work, and you're always going to find something else to latch on to. And I suppose really that's, once I had done Tam O'Shanter and started looking at other poems, I was just amazed that work that was so old could speak to me now as a middle-aged woman, you know, in the 21st century, that it could have such an effect on, you know, just on you. I just was quite bowled over by that. And that's what made me realise how special the words are. And, you know, they have to be treated with care and reverence and love. You can't just throw them out your mouth. They've got to come out, you know, in a way that does all that justice, I think.
There's certainly an argument for the relevance of burns today, but when you hear lines like there are in Tam O'Shanter, or gentle dames at Garsby Greek, to think a money counsel sweet, a money lengthened sage advices, the husband to the wife despises. Anything less relevant today, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, there's always stuff in there, and I've not done it very often, but I have recited burns at some funerals, and I do remember one where the gentleman wasn't old, and his brother and partner came up, and he played the guitar and she played the fiddle, and I then said the words of a man's a man for all that in its entirety, and I can't describe how I felt. The profundity of the words at that occasion just, it was just sensational, really. And I feel the same way about certain verses of Burns. I feel like that about Auld Lang Syne. Now, you know, it's kind of been parodied over the years. People will maybe get fed up of it, think it's a bit stale, but for me it lives as if for the first time every time I hear it. And I just love the fact that no matter where you are in the world, whatever celebration it is, Burns with Auld Lang Syne has the last laugh every single time. He gets the last word in there every time, and I just adore it. I love it. And it's about friendship, and friendship's very important to me, and yeah, I just adore it.
Well, you very cleverly got us to Auld Lang Syne at about the same time as we need to close this episode. So that was amazing. Well done. Is there anything else that we need to ask Susie, Jim?
No, just you've spoken about the future in Burns, but have you any particular direct ambitions in terms of Burns?
Yes, I'm working on something just now that I hope will come to fruition, regarding Tam O'Shanter, actually. Because it's my hope to do a performance of Tam O'Shanter using Makaton, which is a sign language that's based on British Sign Language, but the main difference is that you sign as you speak. So I'm working with someone to try and make sure that I get the right signs, and I'm hoping that, you know, in a few months' time I would be ready to go with that for, you know, either later on in the year or for January next year, to be able to try that as a performance.
Well, that's a very, very positive note for us to end on, and wish you all success with that. And it really just leaves me with the opportunity to say thank you very much for giving up your time and for telling us all about your life with Robert Burns. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you, Douglas and Jim. It's been a real delight to talk to you this morning, and thank you so much for asking.